Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. So this is by way of somewhat getting into a question that came up. Somebody said something about their gut feeling, and I said, you should go into your heart. Your gut is not a reliable organ. The heart is not the physical heart, as you might imagine. And it isn't an emotion. If we try to think of the heart in an ordinary way, then it is just the same as the gut. But in the Trika tradition, there's a very specific, special experiences of what's called the cave of the heart, or the heart space. And the heart is considered to be the source of the ultimate wisdom. In a human body, that space, or that cave of the heart, or that heart of wisdom, is in the center of the chest. As you know, many of the kriyas that we do are kriyas that invoke an experience of that heart space. After many years of practicing and meditating in that heart space and working with that space, you have a different kind of experience of that and a different kind of connection to wisdom through that space than in an ordinary way, just some kind of ordinary intuition or ordinary feeling about something or ordinary impulse. It feels very, very different. And part of that difference, which cannot be described in words, there is absolutely no way that I can tell you about the experience of the space of the heart in words. It can only be pointed to. But part of that experience is an experience of vastness. Unlike an experience that we would have with our ordinary physical body, the experience of the heart is entering into some experience of vastness and also getting contact with a kind of intelligence that is supra-personal. It's not our individual intelligence. It's not our individual intelligence. We are an aspect of it, so it's not like it's something divorced from us that we're getting in touch with. But it has a very different quality than our ordinary intelligence or intellect or thought process. And it has that way of operating that informs our whole tradition, and the reason it's called direct realization. Because when we have an experience of that, there's immediate knowledge of a different sort than the knowledge that we come up with through our ordinary impulses or thinking processes. And also in the tradition, everything that is happening by our experience inside of us is also happening everywhere. Whenever we get in touch with something in this microcosm of our bodies, it is also something that is being produced by a much larger expression of that same thing. So the heart is the central discovery in Trika Shaivism. It's a metaphor, but it isn't only a metaphor. It is an actual discovery. It's an experiential discovery that the heart is discovered everywhere, not just here. So we can begin using our bodies, and of course the tradition, many traditions from India and Tibet teach us this, not just Trika, that the human body is the best vehicle for discovering who you really are and what this really is. We use this, our vehicle, to discover how everything is, not just how this is. That heart we discover everywhere. And what that means is, in practical terms, that we have an experience of everything being like space shining with intelligence. Even that is a diminution. It's a limited way of expressing what the actual experience is. And we can begin to discover that by exploring the cave of the heart. It's not the only way, but it's one of the more powerful ways to discover that vastness shining with primordial intelligence. And as Abhinavagupta says, once you discover that in one place, you've discovered it everywhere. There's no such thing as, I discovered it here and then I don't notice it anywhere else. It just doesn't work that way. So, luckily for us. This is what Ma says. As there is a state of supreme self-knowledge, likewise there is a state of perfection at the zenith of the path of love. There one finds the nectar of perfect love is identical with supreme knowledge. The supreme emotion is equal to the supreme knowledge. That when we attain one, we automatically attain the other. In this state of supreme love or supreme knowledge, same thing, there is no room for emotional excitement. And this is how you know the difference between the wisdom of the heart and the promptings of the quote-unquote gut. It's very practical and very obvious. When you're following the wisdom of the heart, this supreme love that is the same as supreme self-knowledge, which even though us in our shlubby, non-enlightened condition don't have access to it all the time, we can have access to it some of the time. When whatever it is you're doing or saying is coming from that wisdom, is an impulse being driven by that wisdom of the heart, there is no emotional excitement. There is no outrage. There's no feeling of betrayal. There's no urgency. There's no sense of self-importance or self-righteousness. There's no feeling of something being wrong. Right? It has that utter certainty of the heart informed by the utter compassion of the heart. That is different than our ordinary emotions. So if you feel yourself, I know this to be true, and you're filled with urgency and a feeling of righteousness, and I must convince all these people of my point of view, then whatever it is you're saying, no matter how correct in an ordinary sense, it is not that wisdom that is coming directly from the space of the heart. Indeed, if there were emotional excitement, that would make it impossible for the supreme love. Now it's called the Mahabhava, that's the word. The great feeling. Okay. Mahabhava, that's what that means. Indeed, if there were emotional excitement, that would make it impossible for Mahabhava to shine forth. It gets in the way. All this intensity of emotion. Even intensity of, I love you. That is not the love that she's talking about. There's no even urgency about how much I love you or how much compassion I feel so much compassion for you. I can say I feel compassion if it's really coming from the heart and the person has the capacity, they will just feel it. And there's no need and no desire to light it up with Christmas lights. Right? There's no Vaseline lens, there's nothing like, shooting through a lens with gauziness. At the Supreme Summit, this Mahabhava, exuberance, excessive emotion, and the like cannot possibly occur. If you are acting under the influence of this direct wisdom, this direct compassion, this direct love, this Mahabhava, this clarity, this primordial intelligence. If you're acting, you're being directed by that. There's no need to impress anybody with anything. Right? It is just how things are. And there's a settled kind of practical quality, right? There's also the understanding, the direct understanding that everything's okay, right? The understanding that everything's fine. Because this Mahabhava is equal to knowledge of how things are. Right? They always are together. You can't have this direct feeling of the heart, this direct Mahabhava come. You can't have access to it without having access to the knowledge of how things are. And then that knowledge of how things are just makes everything non-urgent. Emotional excitement and supreme love are in no wise to be compared. They are totally different from one another. While absorbed in meditation, whether one is conscious of the body or not, whether there be a sense of identification with the physical or not, under all circumstances, it is imperative to remain wide awake. And I think what she means there is that this overexcitement, whether it's exuberance or over-the-top expressions of joy or anger or outrage or whatever it is, any of those things are not wide awakeness. Right? Only this Mahabhava is an expression of wide awakeness, and it's different from what we call our intuition or our gut feeling or what our conviction. Right? It's very different than conviction. It doesn't have that feeling of, I have this very strong conviction and you must understand me. It doesn't have any feeling like that at all. So this is a really big difference between our ordinary experience of emotions and the experience of this Mahabhava that comes from this vast space of the heart.
I'm surprised. I would think that the gut feeling would be like a step-down version or a more limited version of wisdom.
When people say my gut feeling, they could mean different things, clearly. Sometimes that just refers to their compulsion. Right? A strong compulsion. I know so-and-so loves me, and that's why I'm loitering outside of their house. Until, I always like to use that example because a stalker has a very strong conviction that what they're doing is right and that they actually know what the truth of the situation is and the truth of someone else's emotions. They have a very strong conviction. It's not made up. Like, they actually think that they're right about that and that stalking someone is a thing to do. We can have a feeling of conviction and urgency and rightness and righteousness and be completely out of touch with what's really going on. And that comes from very strong karmas. Then there's what we arrive at through intellect and reason. And that also is going to have a big dose of the concepts and cultural, social cliches that we've grown up with and been immersed in. So something sounds absolutely reasonable, but it might not be the wisest course of action. For instance, it's good to save for retirement. Could anyone argue with that? Well, sure. There's no one thing that's good all of the time. So there are people who don't live their lives fully because they're saving for retirement. They actually cut the legs off of their own life in order to ensure some kind of security later on. Right? And it sounds very reasonable from some perspective. Right? It has social approval attached to it. Right? Or people that, for instance, without thinking that there might be anything better to do with one's money, buy fancy cars and other kinds of fancy things that are, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, if we're looking at the wisdom of the heart, there might be something more compassionate to do with your money than buy a Mercedes. There's like nothing wrong with a Mercedes, but people just unconsciously think, I make a lot of money, this is what I'm owed. I'm owed a Mercedes, and it's a cool thing, and I want one. Fine. That sounds perfectly reasonable. I worked for my money, I can do what I want with my money. Sure, you can. Right? But it isn't going to be as satisfying to have a Mercedes as to give money to a nonprofit that's feeding kids who need food. I mean, it just isn't going to be as satisfying in the long run. But if you're not in touch with the wisdom of the heart, you're not going to know that. But it will sound completely reasonable. So there's a lot of things that we can come up with that sound wise, sound reasonable, make sense to us and everybody around us, but they're still happening within a very narrow frame of reference. Right? Then there's just people who are somewhat more in touch with the heart, who just naturally organize their lives with other people in mind. Right? That's the big difference. Right? The more energy rises permanently to the heart and here and here and here to the crown, all of our feelings get universalized. So the more the energy rises and stays, the more we want to use our resources and our time to benefit other people. Just happens naturally, right? In whatever sphere that we're in. The difference, though, between all of that and being more immersed continuously in this wisdom of the heart space is that the wisdom of the heart space has no rules. It has no paradigms. It has no past, present, or future. It's coming out of the timeless, and it's a direct expression of timelessness. So it is without any boundary. It is not predictable. Right? It doesn't obey necessarily social or cultural rules. It doesn't have common sense necessarily. It might look like anything. So when you really are resting there, there's a sense of freshness in everything that's happening because there's no precedent.
I'm a little hung up on what Ma says around exuberance and being in Mahabhava and Kale and the concept of if you're in Mahabhava, you could scream and laugh out of responsiveness to the moment.
Sure. But anything could happen.
But it wouldn't have that fixated constraint.
Well, I don't think Ma's saying don't laugh, because she always said we should laugh a lot. Right?
But it's a different quality to the laughter that she's saying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And again, the word freshness comes up. There's a fresh quality. I think it means more getting overexcited about things, right? Yeah. The sort of, this is so amazing kind of a thing. Yeah. Or being too happy when good things happen. If we get all excited, we got some job, right? And we just get almost like, okay, I'm set. Whew. All my troubles are over. This is it. Got this amazing job. Next day, company just went bankrupt, sorry. I don't think she's saying don't feel happy. I think she's saying that there's a kind of happiness or exuberance that's trying to overwrite impermanence and our understanding of, or an experience of impermanence.
Give us a ground.
Yeah, exactly. Using that as a ground. Perfect way of putting it. Yeah. And that's really the adventure. Just feeling your way, not knowing what's going to happen from one minute to the next. That's the great adventure. We're all wanderers in samsara. And you could say, well, that's a tragedy. But if you're not wandering through the realms, you're just wandering. It's not a tragedy, it's wonderful. It's like being on a permanent adventure. If you let go of your concepts and your ideas about how things have to be, and how your life has to look, and how you have to behave, and how other people have to behave, and what has to happen, and what you have to get, and who you have to be. If you let go of all of that, you're just left with a kind of bubbling spring of interest. If you're not trying to be something and project a person, you're not worried about your existence because you understand how things actually are, and that you're an aspect of that vast intelligence. There's nothing to worry about. Doesn't mean you're happy all the time, but it means you're feeling the palette of human emotions without feeling like you're being attacked or damaged in any way. And then you're just free to feel the enormous subtlety of everything. And that's it. Period. You don't have to be on a mission. I mean, really, there's literally nothing to accomplish. So if there's nothing to accomplish, you can just do whatever you want. Obviously, I don't mean everyone can be a concert pianist if they want to. We all are limited creatures, and we came in with certain things, and we're not going to be totally free of all these karmas, but we can be free enough to enjoy ourselves a whole heck of a lot more. The number one sign that your practice is working is that you start to care about other people and notice other people and notice things, notice everything more. In our culture, we're just constantly looking inward and worrying about ourselves. And when that starts to ease up, you really have something. Right? When you start to naturally be concerned about the welfare of others, when you encounter a circumstance, you're able to think about it in bigger terms, not just about your fantasies about something. For instance, somebody was talking to me the other day about they get really upset if someone doesn't respond to a text or a message on Slack or something. And it really makes them feel horrible if someone doesn't respond or doesn't respond in a fairly quickly way. And I was saying, well, you have to start thinking about other people's lives when you get into that state. Other people are busy. They have jobs, they have kids, they have other stuff that they're doing. They may never have even seen it. They may have thought of answering it, but then just never gotten back to it. I mean, 99% of the time probably has nothing to do with you at all. But if you don't start thinking about other people and considering how other people's lives are, then all you're left with is all your karmas related to you. Right? And it's just like living in this tiny little, like the tiniest tiny house possible, with all the walls just like you can barely move. That's what that's like. When you don't think of the world and how it is and other people and how they are and the bigger circumstance that you're in, when you're not thinking about that, when your mind doesn't go there, then you're just literally in this coffin-sized house. And you suffer from that. You're creating your own suffering out of that. And we're champions at doing that. It's a good thing to remember that whatever anyone thinks is so important, whatever you think is so, so, so important, must be brought out into the light. Your life is a flash in human history, right? Our urgency is so funny because even in just ordinary terms, we're here for such a brief time. What do we think is so urgent or important about what we're doing, really? Right? It's another way we just kind of get into a hothouse of me. So it's always very good to remember how short your life is and how long the expanse of time is in relative terms. It's good to think about our planet, and it's just a speck in a galaxy among galaxies, among universes and universes. It's always good to push your thoughts out and remember that you are totally insignificant. And what does that leave us with? A feeling of insignificance? No. Because insignificance and significance are insignificant. It's really just about playfulness. If we can get to the point where we're experiencing, at least some of the time, the real understanding that is just about playfulness, that we can live our lives in a more playful way. So the thought of your own insignificance, or even the unimportance of importance versus unimportance, this reality does not function on a continuum of important to unimportant, or significant to insignificant, or urgent to non-urgent.